stop for a second before you scroll away, because this is not landing in front of you by accident. Something inside you has been pulling on this connection for a long time, even when your mind tried to stay practical, even when the outside story looked delayed, messy, or impossible to explain. Think about that person now. Let their face come into your mind. Notice what happens in your chest when you do. That warmth, that ache, that strange mix of peace and pressure. That is not you imagining things. That is not you being too emotional. That is your heart reacting to something real before your mind has fully found the words for it. And if this connection has been confusing, if it has stretched you, tested you, and kept you wondering why it feels so important, stay with me, because there is a reason. There is something that has to happen first before this bond can become what it was always meant to be. And when you see it clearly, you will stop calling this delay a punishment and start seeing it as preparation. Keep listening, because the part most people miss is exactly the part that changes everything. This person did not come into your life to give you a small feeling and then disappear like nothing happened. They touched something deeper than attraction. They reached the parts of you that have been waiting to feel recognized, chosen, understood, and safe all at once. That is why this connection feels bigger than logic. That is why it keeps returning to your mind even when you try to be calm about it. People often think real love should feel easy from the start, like instant comfort, instant certainty, instant peace. But the deepest connections often do something very different first. They disturb what has been hidden. They shake old habits loose. They bring your fears to the surface. They expose the ways you learned to survive instead of the ways you learned to love. So when this person entered your life, it did not just awaken desire, it awakened truth. It pulled open wounds, old beliefs, deep hopes, and emotional patterns that were quietly running the show in both of you. That is why things can feel so powerful and so hard at the same time. This is not a weak connection. It is strong enough to bring hidden things into the light. And that kind of bond does not stay shallow for long. Stay here, because the next part explains why one person reaches while the other one retreats, even when the feeling is real on both sides. Very often, one person in this bond has learned to hold on tighter when love feels uncertain. They give more, they wait longer, they think harder. They try to fix what is unclear by offering even more patience, more understanding, more emotional effort. Deep down, there is a fear that if they do not keep showing up, love will slip away. Silence feels dangerous, distance feels personal. Uncertainty feels like something must be done immediately. But on the other side, the other person may be carrying the opposite wound. They may have learned that closeness is risky, that intimacy can overwhelm them, that if someone gets too close, they could lose control, lose freedom, lose themselves, or face pain they never really healed. So when the connection becomes real, they pull back. Not because it means nothing, but because it means too much. On the surface, it looks one-sided. It looks like one person cares and the other person avoids, but underneath it, both are reacting to fear. One fears being left, the other fears being consumed. One moves toward, the other creates space. And the painful part is that both can be feeling the same depth while expressing it in completely opposite ways. If that sounds familiar, keep going, because this next truth may finally put language to what has been happening between you. The person who keeps reaching has to learn something difficult. Love is not supposed to cost you your center. Love is not supposed to ask you to abandon yourself just to stay connected. Your worth is not measured by how much confusion you can survive, how much silence you can excuse, or how much pain you can carry while still being soft. And the person who pulls away has to learn something just as hard. Distance may protect them from immediate fear, but it also blocks them from receiving the very love they secretly want. Avoidance can feel safe for a moment, but it does not bring peace. It brings guilt, it brings loneliness, it brings overthinking in quiet moments when there is nothing left to distract the heart. That is why this connection becomes such a turning point. It does not just ask whether you love each other. It asks whether both of you are ready to heal the parts that make love feel dangerous. Real transformation is not always graceful. Sometimes it looks like mixed signals. Sometimes it looks like silence, confusion, emotional overload, or long stretches where nothing seems to move. But do not mistake that for meaninglessness. Growth often looks messy before it looks wise. Keep listening, because what needs to happen first is not what most people think. The turning point in a connection like this does not begin with a perfect message from them. It does not start with the conversation you have been rehearsing in your head. It does not arrive because they suddenly say exactly what you wanted to hear after weeks or months of uncertainty. It begins inside you, quietly, firmly. It begins the moment you stop waiting to be chosen as the final proof of your value and start choosing yourself in a real way. Not as a performance, not as a trick to get their attention, not as a game of pretending you do not care. I mean truly turning your energy back toward your own life, your own body, your own peace, your own unmet needs, your own future. That is the thing that has to happen first, because as long as you are reaching from fear, you keep feeding the same old pattern. As long as your whole emotional life is hanging on what they do next, you remain trapped inside the same cycle. But when you begin to come home to yourself, something changes in the space between you. The energy becomes different, the pressure leaves, the fear softens, and for the first time they are left alone with what they actually feel instead of only reacting to the tension around it. Stay with me, because this is the point where many people either lose the connection completely or finally help it become real. I need you to hear this clearly. Everything you have felt in this connection has meant something. None of your love was wasted. None of your waiting was empty. None of your tears were pointless. I know there were nights when you wondered if all of this was just living inside your head, if the depth you felt had nowhere to land, if maybe you were carrying meaning for two people while the other person moved on untouched. But love does not vanish like smoke just because the timing is wrong. Real feeling leaves an imprint. It changes the one who gives it, and it changes the one who receives it, even when that change is slow, hidden, or delayed. The quiet nights, the unanswered questions, the ache of feeling so much with so little clarity around it, all of that has been shaping you. It has been deepening your standards. It has been showing you how much you are capable of loving, and also how necessary it is to love without disappearing inside someone else's confusion. That matters, more than you know right now. So if you have been hard on yourself for still caring, stop there for a moment. The fact that you remained open does not make you weak. It means your heart recognized something valuable. But this next stage is not about proving that love by suffering longer. It is about honoring that love by becoming stronger inside yourself. What does that actually look like? It looks simple from the outside, but deep down, it is a huge shift. You start asking yourself a question you may have ignored for too long. What do I need right now? Not what do they need from me? Not what can I say that will make them understand? Not what could I do differently to make this finally move? What do I need? What have I been postponing in my own life while all my emotional energy sat in this one space? Maybe it is rest. Maybe it is joy. Maybe it is friends you have neglected because your thoughts were elsewhere. Maybe it is routines, health, goals, sleep, creativity, faith, or simple peace. You begin filling your own life again. You return to the parts of yourself that were left waiting in the background while this connection took center stage. You start saying yes to yourself. You stop making your whole inner world a tiny room with one person and one outcome sitting in the middle of it. And no, this does not mean the love disappears overnight. It does not mean you stop caring. It means your life becomes larger than your longing. That is the shift. That is the medicine. That is the first thing that must happen before this connection can stand on healthy ground. And if you stay with this message, the next part will show you why that inner shift changes them too, whether they admit it or not. When you truly begin to root back into yourself, your presence changes, quietly but unmistakably. You stop carrying the feeling of an incomplete sentence waiting for someone else to finish it. You stop living like your real life can only begin once they decide something. You start moving with more calm, more dignity, more steadiness, and people can feel that even if they cannot explain it. There is something deeply magnetic about a person who is no longer chasing from emptiness, no longer begging life to confirm their worth, no longer shrinking themselves to keep a fragile connection alive. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about acting detached. It is about becoming full. And when you become full, the whole dynamic shifts. The one who was pulling away can no longer only feel your need, your pain, your pressure, your fear. Now they feel your absence differently. Now they feel your groundedness. Now they are left to face their own emotions without your constant reaching covering the deeper truth. This is where real clarity often begins for them. Not because you manipulated the situation, but because you stopped carrying all the emotional weight by yourself. Stay with me here because I want to talk about them for a moment in a way that may soften some of the confusion without excusing the hurt. They are not necessarily cold, they are not necessarily heartless, they are not necessarily someone who never cared. Very often, what looks like distance is someone managing fear they do not fully understand themselves. Long before you came into their life, they may have learned that love comes with pressure, loss, disappointment, betrayal, or emotional danger. So when something real appears, their system reacts before their words do. They become inconsistent, they go quiet, they overthink, they retreat. They feel deeply, then panic because depth asks something from them they do not yet know how to give without feeling exposed. That does not make the pain okay, it does not erase the impact on you, but it does explain why this has felt so complicated. They think about you more than you know, in the spaces between distractions, in the pauses after busy days, in the moments when life gets still enough that truth starts speaking. Your energy does not leave them just because they created distance. That is the part many people never see. The bond can remain active under the silence. Their care can remain real under the confusion. But their healing is still their job. You cannot walk that road for them. You cannot love them out of fear. You cannot rescue them into readiness. And that is why your part matters so much now. Keep listening, because this next piece is the one that protects your heart while still honoring the connection. Your job is not to fix their fear. Your job is not to wait in emotional suspension until they become ready. Your job is not to turn their unresolved wounds into a story about your value. Your job is to hold yourself with enough love and self-respect that their confusion does not become your identity. That means no more measuring your worth by their pace. No more treating their silence like a final statement on your desirability, your beauty, your depth, or your future. No more making their hesitation bigger than your truth. If this connection is meant to become real in the way your heart senses, it will not happen through your self-abandonment. It will happen when both people become more available for honesty. And that requires something from them, yes, but it also requires something from you. It requires you to stop feeding the old belief that love must be earned by overgiving. It requires you to stand in your own light even before the ending becomes clear. That is what changes everything. Because if they do come forward later, they should meet a version of you that is not hollowed out by waiting, not desperate to be validated, not reduced by longing, but solid, awake, and fully connected to your own life. That is the version of you who can actually receive real love when it arrives. Imagine a morning not too far from now. You wake up and that heavy pressure in your chest is no longer running your life. Not because you forced yourself not to care, not because you became numb, not because you shut your heart down. It is gone because the story has changed inside you. The love either has somewhere real to land, or you have become strong enough not to bleed every day from what is still unresolved. Either way, you are no longer trapped in the same cycle. Imagine seeing this person and feeling peace instead of panic. Imagine looking into their face and seeing steadiness instead of hesitation, openness instead of resistance, presence instead of half-effort. Imagine being in a love that does not keep your nervous system on alert, a love where you are not reading between lines, preparing for the next silence, or wondering if you are too much. Imagine the relief of being fully chosen by someone who is fully there. That kind of love is not fantasy, but it cannot be built on old fear. It cannot be built while one person is chasing from lack and the other is hiding in avoidance. Something has to mature first, something has to settle, something has to end before something stronger can begin, and that something is not always the connection. Sometimes it is the version of you that believed uncertainty was the price of deep love. This is why the delay has meaning. This is why the middle feels so intense. The middle is where identities break. The middle is where old patterns get exposed. The middle is where you learn the difference between attachment and true love. Attachment says, "Do not leave me because I need you to fill what is empty in me." True love says, "I want to meet you fully, but I will not abandon myself to do it." Attachment panics. True love breathes. Attachment clings to signs and scraps. True love grows standards. Attachment lives in fear of loss. True love can wait without losing itself. That is the deeper lesson underneath all of this. You are not being prepared for a love that keeps you permanently confused. You are being prepared for a love that fits, a love that can hold the size of your heart without making you apologize for it. But to arrive there, you must become someone who no longer accepts half-presence as destiny. This part is crucial, so do not miss it. Just because a connection feels fated does not mean every version of it is healthy. Some versions must fall apart so a better version can be built later. Some forms of closeness must end before real union becomes possible. And sometimes the thing that must happen first is not their return, it is your rise. Your rise will not always look dramatic. It may look like small daily choices, sleeping better, eating better, returning to your work, reaching back to people who make you feel alive, picking up old dreams, laughing again without guilt, creating space where your life is not paused around one person's emotional timeline. At first, it may feel strange. You may think, if I loosen my grip, will I lose the connection? But the truth is the opposite. Loosening the grip is often what allows truth to breathe. What is real does not need panic to survive. What is meant to deepen cannot do it well while your whole being is wrapped around fear. So you keep turning inward in the healthiest way. You keep building a life that feels like yours again. You keep trusting that your value is not waiting in someone else's final decision. And as you do, you become more yourself, more radiant, more stable, more clear. That clarity becomes a kind of signal, not just to them, but to life itself. It says, I am ready for what is honest. I am ready for what is mutual. I am ready for what is mature. And anything less can no longer stay. That is not loss. That is refinement. That is alignment. Keep listening, because the next part is about what may be happening inside them while you are doing this work. While you are learning not to abandon yourself, they may be learning what your absence really means. Not just missing attention, not just noticing a change in contact, something deeper. They may be sitting alone with feelings they kept pushing aside. They may finally hear their own heart without the noise of defensiveness, distraction, pride, or emotional control. They may start to see how much they cared, how much fear guided them, how much they confused distance with protection. This does not always happen loudly. Sometimes it happens in very human moments, a quiet drive, a late night, a random memory that will not leave, a strange heaviness after trying to move on too quickly, a realization that what they felt with you was not ordinary, and ordinary things do not keep returning with this much weight. But even if this awakening happens for them, it still cannot replace your own growth. Their realization is important, but your peace is essential. Their feelings matter, but your center matters more. Because if anything is going to be built between you later, it must come from two people who are no longer ruled by old wounds. Two people who can stand in truth without running. Two people who know what love is and also know what self-respect is. That is the kind of bond worth waiting for, and it is also the kind of bond worth walking away from if it never becomes real enough. Do not let the difficulty of this season convince you that your ending will be painful too. The middle is often the hardest part because it feels unclear, stretched, and emotionally expensive. But the middle is not the final truth. It is a crossing place, a place where you are becoming someone who can receive what you once only dreamed of without losing your balance in the process. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not foolish for feeling this deeply. You are inside a season that is asking you to become stronger than your fear, wiser than your longing, and more loyal to your own soul than you have ever been before. Every time you choose healing over panic, every time you choose dignity over chasing, every time you choose your own life over emotional waiting, you lay another piece of the foundation for the love you actually want. That foundation matters, because when the right moment comes, whether it is with this person in a healed form or with a love that meets you even more fully, you will be ready. Not starving, not begging, not doubting your worth. Ready, whole, present, capable of receiving without collapsing. That is the destiny hidden inside this delay, not just union, preparation for union. So if you ask what needs to happen first before you and this person can truly be together, here is the answer. You must return to yourself. They must face what they have been running from. The old version of this connection, the one built on fear, pursuit, silence, and emotional imbalance, has to end. That is what happens first. Not because the love was false, but because it was real enough to demand a better form. And that better form cannot arrive while one person is dissolving into hope and the other is hiding behind hesitation. Something stronger is trying to be born here. A bond with honesty, with steadiness, with mutual effort, with nervous systems that can finally rest instead of bracing for the next wave. Trust that what is truly yours cannot be taken by timing, fear, or temporary distance forever, but also trust this. What is truly yours will ask you to rise before it asks you to receive. So rise, turn inward, build your peace, strengthen your life. Let your heart stay open, but let your standards rise with it. And if this connection is meant to return in a real way, it will meet you there, not in your old waiting, but in your new clarity. That is where love stops hurting like confusion and starts feeling like home.